Hey everyone, I'm Amelia, born and raised in a quiet little town in California, surrounded by tree-lined streets and rows of houses stretching down the lanes. I spent most of my childhood here with my parents. My mom was a gentle woman, always smiling at me from early morning when she'd make breakfast, till dusk in our small kitchen. She adored my dad, a man of few words but always responsible, working hard to support the family. We lived in a small, simple house, but it was full of love. In my memory, everything was perfect, or at least, that's what I thought. But then, when I was just 15, my world fell apart. My mom passed away after a short, sudden illness. It happened so quickly, I barely had time to understand what was going on. The emptiness inside me grew as I watched my dad, who was now lonely in a house that once echoed with laughter. We went on with life, but we were no longer the family we used to be. Every morning I'd go to school, every night I'd come home to the same kitchen, the same simple meals. But my mom was no longer there. Every meal had just the two of us, but the distance between my dad and me felt wider than the walls of our home. Then, when I turned 18, my dad remarried. It was a shock, even though deep down I knew he deserved happiness again. His new wife, my stepmom, was a kind and gentle woman. She brought her son with her, Dylan, who was a year younger than me. At first, it all felt strange, like my life was flipped upside down once more. Things were no longer the peaceful rhythm I knew. Trying to get along with this new younger brother was awkward, even though he never did anything to make me feel uncomfortable. Dylan was quiet, probably trying to adjust to everything too. In the evenings, the whole family would gather in the living room. Dad and my stepmom would sit together, chatting about work or future plans, while Dylan and I would exchange confused glances, quickly looking away. Family dinners slowly became a way for us to get to know each other better, but in a weird, distant way. Dylan would sometimes pick food for me, a small gesture that made me feel uneasy. He didn't talk much, but there were times he'd look at me longer than usual. I wondered if I was overthinking, or if it was just natural for him to look up to his new older sister. But as time passed, there was an undeniable tension between us, one we never talked about. The feelings that should have just been sisterly somehow grew more confusing. There were moments during the day when I'd feel my heart race if Dylan was nearby, and I hated that feeling. Hated that I'd started to see him as more than just a brother. One late night, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Dylan slipped into my room like usual. We'd normally have a brief, casual conversation before he'd head back to his room, but this time he stayed a little longer, his eyes lingering on me with a look that felt different, deeper, like he was about to say something. I didn't know how to react. The air between us grew thick, tense. I felt so confused, but before I could think about it any further, I nodded slightly, silently inviting him to stay a little longer. We sat there in the dark, just the dim light between us, two people closer in a way words couldn't quite explain. I liked Dylan more than I should. He was handsome in a way that was impossible not to notice. Sometimes I felt guilty even thinking about it, since he was technically my brother, but those thoughts were often fleeting, pushed aside by more logical reasons like living under the same roof or just the fact that we were two young people thrown together. Our rooms were closed, both on the second floor, while Dad and my stepmom slept downstairs. It made things awkward sometimes, with Dylan and me being at such pivotal stages in our lives. I was starting college and he was in his senior year of high school, busy prepping for exams. Both of us were adjusting to the rhythm of this new life, but the tension between us was impossible to ignore. There were evenings after school when we'd sit on the living room couch, the glow of the TV on us, both of us silent, not really knowing what to say. The feelings I had for Dylan weren't exactly the kind of feelings siblings should have. I realized I liked him more than a sister should. It confused me, but every time I saw him, my heart would race. The accidental encounters on the stairs, our eyes meeting, it was like there was something in his gaze that I couldn't ignore. One evening, things took an unexpected turn. It was supposed to be an ordinary night, just us, alone at home, since Dad and my stepmom had gone on a 5-day trip. At first, Dylan and I thought it'd just be a chance to relax without the watchful eyes of adults. That night, we were sitting in the living room watching a romantic movie, mostly just to pass the time. I prepared some snacks, a few dried fruits, a can of beer each, just a bit of unwinding after a hectic week. The movie started lighthearted, easygoing, and we were just chatting, laughing lightly. But then, suddenly, a scene came on where a couple embraced passionately. I don't know why, but we both fell silent. There was no more laughter or small talk. The space between us felt thick, almost stifling. I could feel Dylan's eyes on me, but this time his gaze was different. A warm sensation spread through me, but I kept quiet, gripping the beer can tightly to steady myself. Then, before I knew what was happening, Dylan leaned in and held me. His movements were intense, unexpected, like all the emotions we'd been suppressing just came rushing out. His kisses were urgent, and even though my mind was in chaos, my heart and my body responded. We crossed a line that night, a boundary that, once broken, would never be the same again. The darkness, the quiet of the room, it marked a turning point. That night, everything changed. That night, all the boundaries between us crumbled. I let my emotions take over, let things happen that shouldn't have. We spent the night together, crossing every limit. We didn't say much. It was like everything happened naturally, as if we were simply acting on all the feelings we'd kept hidden. The closeness we'd tried to maintain was gone, replaced by emotions we could no longer control. I remember that next morning vividly. Soft sunlight filtered through the curtains as I lay there beside Dylan in a room that was supposed to be my safe space. Everything around me looked the same. The room was quiet, and the light was warm. But inside, something had shifted. We didn't speak much, just exchanged a look that held everything we couldn't say out loud. We both knew that from this moment on, things would never go back to the way they were. The following days felt like a dream. With my dad and stepmom still away, Dylan and I took full advantage of the time alone. There was no more awkwardness, no hesitation, just a strange sense of comfort, as if we were in our own little world, far from prying eyes. Meals weren't just family meals anymore. They were private moments shared just between us. Every night, we sat together, watching movies, talking, and eventually ending the night in the same bed. I allowed myself to forget reality, to forget that Dylan and I were only siblings by title. During that time, we lived as though we were a young, carefree couple without a single worry in the world. Then, the day came when my parents returned. The moment they walked in, everything shifted back to normal. Dylan and I returned to our roles as siblings under one roof, acting as if nothing had happened, as if those intimate moments were nothing more than a fleeting dream. My parents didn't notice a thing. They were cheerful, sharing stories about their trip, while Dylan and I simply sat in silence, sharing quick, knowing glances. It was a secret we'd have to carry with us, buried deep beneath our everyday lives. In the months that followed, we continued to meet in secret. Those late-night visits, those quiet, stolen moments, they became like a habit. Anytime my parents went to bed early or left the house, Dylan would slip into my room, and we'd cling to each other like there'd never been a wall between us. By day, we acted like everything was normal. We joined family meals, smiled, and kept up the facade, but underneath it all, there was a hidden tension that left me breathless. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to stop. The guilt was always there, gnawing at me, but it was never strong enough to make me give up. I continued to live in this secrecy, every night, every moment, with Dylan becoming so familiar that I feared I'd never be able to break away. Eventually, I started taking birth control pills in secret, hiding them carefully, fearing what might happen if this relationship continued. Instead of stopping, I chose to control it, convincing myself that everything was still manageable, that our secret would never come to light. About a year later, Dylan graduated and moved away for college. I knew this would change things, even though I didn't want to admit it. The distance forced us to put our relationship on hold, and while he was away, those sneaky late nights and quiet moments were no longer possible. The separation left me feeling heavy with a nostalgic ache for what we'd shared. After he left, I tried to move on with my life. I finished college and eventually found a job as an office assistant at a digital company. It wasn't anything glamorous, but it offered stability, a chance to escape from the turmoil of my past. That's when I met him, the man who would change everything. He owned a popular hair salon in the city, a man with a calm, confident air and a charm that was hard to ignore. From the very first moment, I was drawn to him. His strength and gentleness made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt in years. We fell in love quickly, almost as if fate had brought us together to erase the scars of the past. Before long, we were married, and I finally felt like I was building the life I'd always dreamed of. Now we have a child together, and every day feels more complete. Being with him and our child helped me temporarily forget the pain of my past. Although sometimes, in rare moments of weakness, those memories would come back to haunt me. Deep down, I knew I had finally found a true home, a place of love and respect. But somewhere in the back of my mind, the memories of Dylan and those secretive nights hadn't completely faded. A part of me wondered if I would ever truly let go of it all. Yet now I had a family to protect, and that was what mattered most. Still, a lingering guilt gnawed at me, especially toward my husband, who loved me with such genuine warmth. Every time he looked into my eyes, I felt a weight on my heart, like I was hiding a part of myself he deserved to know. Sometimes, the thought of confessing everything kept me up at night. I felt torn between telling him the truth or keeping the secret buried forever. I feared that if I came clean, he'd never look at me the same way again. Everything we'd built, our little family, our dreams, could all fall apart with one confession. But then, keeping silent felt like a burden I was forced to carry every day, a weight that reminded me I didn't deserve his love. Honestly, I don't know what to do. I'm at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. I wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you come clean, knowing it might shatter everything? Or would you stay silent, hoping the past stays buried, letting it fade into memory to protect those you love? I'd appreciate any advice, sympathy, or even criticism, because truly I'm lost, standing here, not knowing which way to turn. As days went by, I carried this secret like a heavy stone in my chest, hidden beneath the layers of my new life. I'd lie awake at night, watching my husband sleep beside me, his peaceful face oblivious to the storm raging inside me. He was a good man, a man who gave me a safe, stable life, the kind of life I had always wanted. I couldn't shake the guilt that kept creeping in, the feeling that I was deceiving him every day. I wondered if, by hiding this part of myself, I was betraying the very love that had saved me. Sometimes, I thought about confessing everything, laying it all bare. But then, fear would pull me back. What if he couldn't couldn't forgive me? What if he saw me differently, or worse, left me? Every little thing we'd built together, our child, our home, our dreams, felt too precious to risk on a truth that might tear it all apart. And yet, staying silent felt like I was living a lie. I tried to convince myself that it was all in the past, that Dylan had moved on just like I had. Yet, despite all the years, I couldn't erase those memories entirely. They lingered like shadows from another life, resurfacing in the quiet moments. I knew I'd never be able to truly let them go, but I also knew that I couldn't let them destroy the life I'd worked so hard to build. It was a constant struggle, an endless battle between holding on and letting go, between truth and silence. So here I am, standing at this crossroad, uncertain of which way to go. I wonder if one day I'll gather the courage to speak, to unburden myself of this secret that haunts me, or if I'll continue to carry it alone, hoping that the love I've found now will be enough to keep me grounded. But I'm reaching out, asking you for advice, for a perspective I might not see myself. If you were in my place, would you risk everything for the truth, or would you keep the past buried, preserving the happiness you found? Please let me know in the comments, because as I stand here, caught between my past and my present, I feel as though my future hangs in the balance, waiting for a choice I'm still too afraid to make.